First item on business is our joint meeting agenda. And we will start by, it says call to order the Planning Commission, and you're here too. So I think you're supposed to call your Planning Commission to order as I've called the City Council to order.
Okay.
Travis, if you would.
Good morning. Before I call the meeting to order, I did have a question or two for Teresa. There was a resolution it looks like that was signed by the Planning Commission on July 19th that calls for 10 days notice, I guess, to be put in the newspaper for the meeting. And okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, so in order to have this joint meeting and provide alternative notice than what the rules normally require, which is publication and written notice to individual property owners,
Yes.
the city council had to have a meeting where they called this meeting and did a resolution and provided for alternative notice, which was still publication and posting of the agenda like they normally would.
Okay, so my question is that this resolution was adopted on the 19th, and it's the 26th. So it hasn't been 10 days, and, you know, normally a resolution would direct the staff to go do something, like if it says to publish in the paper, you'd publish it.
So John may help with this,
Has the notice
but
been sent in the paper?
I think we
Yes.
published it before that actually happened.
Yes, we had, due to the timing, we had already published those in the newspaper ahead of that meeting in anticipation because of the timing issue.
Okay, okay. So, based on that, I have no reason to not call this meeting to order for the Planning Commission. So, we have a quorum.
Thank you. With that, we will start with public comment. Issues or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais, begin by stating their name and address or single-member district number, and limit their remarks to less than 3 minutes. I'm actually going to start with Shane Kelton. If you would come forward, and I think you want to share some information. It's not part of this agenda, but it's information for all those who are watching will want to know.
Yes, ma'am. As everybody knows, and this is kind of not what this meeting's about, but just so everybody knows, I know everybody saw all the mowers out on the loop yesterday, and they've been around town the last 2 or 3 days and last week. A lot of shredding of trash out there along the loop. So visited with TxDOT yesterday afternoon, just so everybody knows. They do have a plan in place to where they are going to be out there with a maintenance group, picking up all that litter and all that trash over the next 2 or 3 weeks. So just wanted to let everybody know there is a plan. I have it right here if anybody wants further details. So
Well, not only did we see a lot of trash, we saw a lot of dirt blowing up.
yes, ma'am.
I think all of us with
It-
allergies had some impact from it.
Yes, ma'am. It definitely needs to rain. So yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment today?
Raise this up. I'm Spencer Matthews, District 5. I have a little bit of an objection to the early posting, because if it was only voted in to have this meeting, and then we're only getting a few days' notice, we haven't had time to understand what's going on in this meeting and what those regulations or what these ordinance changes would be to even organize and get and conform, consent, any kind of anything. And so I kind of object to, or I clearly object to having this meeting right now for those terms. We haven't had time to even review what's going on. There's only 2 paragraphs on the agenda, and that's a problem. And the notice is only this big in the newspaper. You'd have to have a microscope to see it. And so I have an objection to having this meeting.
Thank you. Further public comment?
I'd like to elaborate a little bit on that.
Go ahead, Travis.
So, excuse me, I think the broader issue here is that this meeting is going in the wrong direction in terms of notice to the community. I don't even feel like I was given proper notice, and I'm a participant in the meeting. John sent an email out to all the planning commissioners on June 30th. The email said there were going to be 2 issues on this agenda. One was parking downtown. The other one was short-term rentals downtown. When I pulled a copy of the agenda that was sent out on Friday, one of the items on short-term rentals has been expanded to include the entire city limits, but not single family. So it's not just downtown as we were told originally. We've been talking in the Planning Commission for months about the lack of notice to our residents. And I feel like our citizens have a right to voice their opinions, and especially when we make decisions that have a financial impact on people, we have a responsibility as a board, as the city council, to hear people's opinions. As it relates to this meeting specifically, there's a process that's normally in place. There's 3 forms of notice that are sent out. So any property that's impacted, plus anyone within 200 feet of that property, signs are put in place on those properties, and a notice is put in the newspaper. The newspaper is now circulated, twice a week? If that?
Every day but Saturday.
Okay, every day but Saturday. Is that right? I thought they pulled it back.
No, it's every day but Saturday for home delivery.
Okay, so I don't even take the newspaper. And I don't think I'm the only one in the community that doesn't take the newspaper for notice. So in the normal part of the process, the Planning Commission hears cases, and there's time that passes between our meeting and the city council meeting. And in many circumstances, our board is largely an advisory board as it stands anyway. But when the issue is brought up in our meetings and a decision is made, it prompts folks to take action and show up to the city council meetings where the decision's being made. And a meeting like this eliminates that time, and that's very concerning to me. And then the other issue is, as I was noting, the only notice for this meeting was a little tiny paragraph in the classified ads of the newspaper. Nothing was sent out to anybody in the community that was impacted, that owns a property that may have their rights changed as a result of this meeting. No signs were put up. There was mention of it in our meeting and in the city council meeting, and that's about it. So what I've talked about repeatedly is focus on expanding notice and not excluding the public in our discussions, especially about zoning and property rights. And then on that note, I personally am in favor of moving our Planning Commission meetings to the evenings. There are many communities that have most of their meetings for boards and commissions and the city council in the evening hours. In doing very limited research, Abilene, Lubbock, Fredericksburg, Fort Worth, Waco, Kerrville, Bernie, even Denver, Colorado, which has a regular general comment meeting once a month before their city council meetings in the evenings. We had and I think my colleagues on the Planning Commission could speak to this. We had a gentleman that came in at our last meeting on Monday of last week. The staff had proposed changing the zoning on his property without his consent, and he was upset. He didn't feel like he was given proper notice. He came up in the middle of our meeting and said, "I'm here because someone's trying to change my zoning without my consent. I don't want to do it. You don't have my permission to change my zoning. But I have to go to work, and I can't sit here until the case comes up because I've got a job that I've got to go to." And I think there are a lot of people in my time serving on the Planning Commission that have expressed those same thoughts and concerns. And so that's, to me, the most important thing for us to focus on is expanding notice to our residents. What can we do to better notify our community of the business that we're doing, especially that impacts them?
Thank you, Travis. I want to make sure, Teresa, that there are no issues as it relates to the legal aspects of this meeting, and that all the issues and all the public notices and all the criteria that are required have actually been done, because I don't want to get through this meeting then find out there are major problems with it. So we need to start with, is this legally a meeting?
Yes, ma'am, there is a provision in the the local government code that does allow council and the planning commission to meet jointly and have alternative notice provisions. That case that John referenced last council meeting would have required us to send out 10,000 written notices for this meeting, in excess of 10,000. And as we've known in the past, when you send out notices, there are often cases that something gets missed, and that one, notice getting missed out of those 10,000 could have invalidated the action. So we hesitate to use this provision that we could have these joint meetings and have this alternative notice provision. We've been able to use that for a long time, and we never have, because I don't think we disagree with Travis that as much notice as possible to our community is proper. But this is a proper meeting underneath the local government code, and it has been noticed as was required. Now, I would also like to say that both of the items that are on the agenda will have a second reading at council, so there will be another opportunity for the public to come and to offer their opinions on those things as well. So this process does not end today.
I just hate waiting for second readings for people to address it. I think the most important part is making sure during a first reading, a first conversation, that people have been notified, that the public is first and foremost why we are all up here, so our citizens are key, and we need to make sure that they feel like they have been allowed to be involved in the conversation. And as Travis said, particularly because it is one of property is usually someone's greatest, biggest asset. So what we don't want to be doing is negatively impacting anybody's biggest, best asset. So a lot of people are here today. I hate to have them feel like they are here for no reason. So I think we should proceed. We do not have to take a vote. We could postpone it for further conversation and further notice if we need it. Is that correct?
Yes, you could call it, we would have to bring both bodies together again, but yes, you could do that, postpone it and bring it back.
So
and
we
discuss
will
it again if you
allow
wanted
all
to.
those people here today to be able to voice their issues, concerns, and objections or support. And then if we don't feel comfortable with the conversation today, we can ask that no decision be made today and postpone it for a later meeting. Is that okay with the Planning Commission in terms of their approach? Okay. All right. With that, we will proceed with, yes, please come forward.
My name is Neldon Allen. I'm in Tommy Hubert's district. That's where my home is, but I have property all over San Angelo. And I did not even know that this was happening until last night. So I didn't have the time to look at everything and prepare it. So I really appreciate Ms. Gunner saying that it could be tabled to give people a little more time to do research. Thank you.
So we ask that everybody take time today to come forward and present the questions, concerns, and issues attached to these items so we can decide what to do. With that, we will go into item 4A, discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending Chapter 12, Planning and Development Exhibit 8, Zoning Ordinance, Article 5, General Development Standards, Section 511, Off-Street Parking Standards regarding parking for assembly occupancies in the Central Business District, Zoning District, and John, you're on.
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. I just wanted to make two comments about the previous discussion. One, if it wasn't for that court case, this process is the same as the normal process for text amendments to the zoning ordinance, other than the fact that you're meeting together. And so we haven't really backed off of any notice. This is the way it's been done for literally decades. For ordinance amendments. We always notify folks if their property zoning is changing, but when we make amendments to the ordinance, we've never sent out notices for that. It's never been required. The second point I would make, just for your information, when we get to the second item, that actually went to the Planning Commission back in May, so they've already heard the second item and made a recommendation on it. So if that changes your opinion on how to proceed today,
John, I don't think that's correct. The discussion that we had in the Planning Commission was as it related to downtown. And this item on the agenda is for the entire city except for residential zoned lots.
Well, the question is, the one we're talking about, parking, not short-term rentals. So are you referring to
He's talking about short-term rentals, ma'am.
Right,
Item B.
Okay.
but I'm talking about A, and that's the first item on the agenda.
Okay.
So when we get to that, we can have that discussion, but the discussion we're going to have first and foremost is the parking downtown. So item 4A.
So this item is about parking downtown. As you probably know, we do not currently have any parking requirements in downtown. The idea is it's a dense urban area, and most cities' downtowns don't provide or don't require businesses to provide individual parking for each business. And that's exactly what our current ordinance does as well. We've had some recent interest in large-scale venue-type locations downtown. And so we've brought this up based on a possible concern that a big event venue that might have hundreds of people would potentially create parking problems for other businesses downtown. And so, again, the downtown has parking to accommodate most of the businesses that are there with on-street parking, some off-street parking. But the concern is if we have one of these large events that would draw over 400 people, that might create spillover impacts throughout the downtown. And so that's the reason this is coming forward. And so the proposal is to amend the ordinance to require parking for those uses that have a capacity of over 400 people. But rather than requiring specific numbers of parking spaces, it would require a parking plan to be submitted, and that would be reviewed and approved by the city council. So you all could take the unique characteristics of each individual proposal into account. And I don't think our intent is for the normal parking standards to apply. So if, for example, if you have a bar out by the mall, it would require X number of parking spaces. I don't think we would want to apply that same standard downtown, but at the same time, the idea is maybe we should require them to provide some parking. But again, it would be a case-by-case determination by the city council. The way the ordinance is written, it would apply to assembly occupancies, and I've listed the most common assembly-type occupancies, but that includes event centers, bars, restaurants, theaters, churches, things that have the assembly of lots of people in one place. I won't go through this in depth, but basically this would be the process. An applicant would submit a building permit for a new use or a change of occupancy of an existing building. We would determine if the occupancy of that building is over 400 or not. If so, we would ask them to submit a parking plan. We would review it and then ultimately bring it to city council for a decision.
Generally speaking, Monday through Thursday, there are not parking issues in our downtown area. However, on Fridays and Saturdays, when most events and large crowds assemble, there are parking issues. Most people know if someone goes to Walmart, they don't mind parking half a mile away to get to Walmart. But when they're in the downtown area, they very much want to park in front of a business. So we know that parking becomes an issue, and we want to make sure that all businesses feel like they are not being wiped out as it relates to customers getting to their business. On the other hand, when we ask for alternative parking plans, the question is, what would that encompass, and where would they find that parking, and how do other cities address it? Many cities have parking garages. We don't. The one that we have downtown is for private use only for the Spur building. Without that building, then where else are alternative parking options? And we need to talk through that so someone would know where to go, what to do, and how to start with a parking plan. And then, Dale, you're in the audience. You want to come forward and talk about parking and the experiences you're have had, and perceive to be issues.
Certainly. Excuse me. Recently, we looked at parking availability based from Cohenhain on the east-west corridor, from the west Cohenhain all the way to Magdalen, and the north-south geographic. We looked at River Drive, all the way up to College, which is where most of the activities and most of the complaints that I get in relationship to parking occur. So we looked at that area, and we learned that there are 65 parking lots within that geographic area. There are 13 public parking lots. Also, we have 23 private parking lots, and then we have a hybrid of 29 parking lots where you have both public and private parking. So the assessment, we looked at how many parking spaces each lot had, and we found that there was 3,367 parking spaces within that corridor. But that's one issue. The other issue is we, in our community, have a mindset that we are supposed to park in front of where we're going to be. And typically that's not going to happen, especially since we've been seeing a development of downtown and the businesses growth that we've had. So people get frustrated, business owners get frustrated, property owners get frustrated because people are not able to get to, or they hear complaints from their customers about the parking situation. But if you look at, and if you will take a walk with me, if we start at South Chadbourne Street Bridge, if you take about a 30-yard walk, over to your left is a parking lot. If you walk another 30 yards, there's a parking lot at the corner of Concho and Chadbourne.
But let me ask you a question, starting with that. Number one, that first parking lot that you're talking about, two things. One
Right.
is I believe that Twisted Root and Freedom Fellowship Church have the rights to that parking lot.
Right.
Because that is a private parking lot, I
Well,
believe owned by AT&T.
That's
Or-
correct.
All right,
But
so,
it does, people park there, I mean, irregardless, whether, and most people that are going to Twisted Root are going to park there. But what I'm trying to get at is that there is a lot of parking available, and my belief is that we need either to develop an education way to figure out a way to educate people about where to park in downtown, and accept the idea that we're growing and that you're not going to be able to park in front of your store, the store that you're going to all the time. There's obviously there are stores and businesses that have their own parking spaces or parking lots, as Twisted Root does, and they accommodate their customers that way. But it's just a pretty complex situation, and my fear, as far as taking it to another level in terms of putting additional restrictions, is it'll deflate maybe deflate people's interest in developing downtown. That's my fear. Yeah, as far as 400 people, I don't know how many businesses. I didn't have enough time to research this out, but I know how many people have an occupancy of 400 in their space, and I know we're talking about future, right? Future development. But if that does occur, wouldn't the property owner have to submit some plan or idea about what they're doing with their business to get an occupancy? And at that point, wouldn't that trigger possibly taking this type of action?
well, yes and no. I mean, Central Business District doesn't require any parking plan when you look for occupancy. So
Correct. But
that
if,
would not do it, and so that can't be the, the element of how we control it.
but if we have in place a trigger that says, and let everybody know, that if you're going to develop a business that you're expecting to have an occupancy of 400, that would trigger at that time when that person applies for a permit, that at that point, the city would be required to let them, notify them that they would need to have a parking plan. Right?
Correct.
Okay. So I think that would be a fair way of administering it. But it's this problem, as y'all well, or maybe don't know, I do attend conferences yearly, and at the Main Street for Main Street, and one of the issues that we discuss all the time at every one of these conferences are parking issues in downtown. And so I go back to when I first started in 2007. There were issues back then, and they continue to be. And I believe
No, in
that
2007, we didn't have parking issues, because in 2007, there were
it
three
was pretty
businesses
dead.
open
Well,
after the hour of 5 o'clock, so that would not be a correct statement.
Let
Thank
me
you.
rephrase that. Let me rephrase that. I was getting phone calls from businesses upset because employees from other businesses were parking in front of their stores. And so to me, that was a parking problem.
That's the reason the 3-hour limit was created,
Right.
so that our streets were not full of employee parking and no room left for customer
Right,
parking.
and we addressed
So
it.
that was
Yeah,
addressed.
and we addressed it. And so, in relationship to, again, the problem, I think, it's an education thing as far as educating our community about what transpires when you develop a downtown area and what the needs are. And of course, additional parking spaces would be, you know, we've got a tremendous amount of parking space. I just remembered this, down on the river that nobody uses. You know, nobody parks down there and walks to get to their places. So I think it's just an educational.
Question mark is, if you're in that Concho Avenue corridor, then that becomes a parking alternative. If you're on further north on Chadbourne, no one's going to park on the river to walk
Right.
4 blocks north.
Right.
And the other issue is, when people want to park in front of a business, that's generally your retail customer. And from 10 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the evening, parking is not an issue. Nor is it Monday through Thursday. It generally is after 6 o'clock, Friday, sometimes Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
No, I
And
agree with that. I agree. The major congestion that we have, as far as parking is concerned, is over the weekends. But a lot of those lots that are private lots, people park in those parking areas as well. And sometimes
Does that make
those
people who own those parking lots upset?
that it upsets those people, right? And there's alternatives that they can take, however they don't do them. But anyway, that's on them. You know, that's an issue that they need to address. But that's where I see issues. I mean, right now, today or yesterday, I had several complaints from business owners about other businesses and their parking issues that they have. So it's an ongoing issue, and yes, we need to address it. Sure, we should, and we should try to do is be proactive, which is, I believe, what you're trying to do is be proactive in this particular case. So, any questions for me?
Well, anybody have a question, Harry? And then I'll have some questions.
I did think it's just a real quick comment, and Dell said it a little while ago. My son lives in Fredericksburg. If you go downtown in Fredericksburg on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, you got massive amount of people coming through that community. And what people do is they want to go to Fredericksburg, they find a place to park, they're going to walk 5 or 6 blocks to whatever they need to do. So I think education is a big portion of this. As the central business continues to grow, we're just going to have to educate people that there's places to park in San Angelo, in that particular area, but you may not be able to park in front of that business that you want to go to. I think people have gotten comfortable doing that, and now their way is to complain about it. If we're going to grow, we're going to have many people come to this particular community, and they're going to be willing to walk. Our citizens are going to have to do the same thing.
I also, bringing that up, Harry, just throwing this out, I know money's tight, but wayfinding is always a good way to help give people direction about where to park.
Questions for Dale from anybody? All right, so the things I hear are the following. So there are many people who run a business every day of the week or every evening of the week, particularly big business on Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays. And they get very concerned that they've been there, they've run a business, and and all of a sudden someone wants to open up a business that is a venue, which basically means that maybe this Saturday night it's rented out, but that's it. And all of a sudden, the parking becomes a key issue, and their customers that have been supporting that business all of a sudden are upset with it. So how do we address that? Because the venue thing is a large conversation about many of the buildings downtown. Well, I'm going to buy it and turn it into a venue.
Right.
And so that's becoming a pretty big conversation. We want downtown to continue to develop. We want the empty buildings to continue to find someone to develop it. So we don't want to discourage redevelopment. On the other hand, we really want to make sure that the businesses that are there and have invested over the past 15 years are not negatively impacted and continue to have a success story.
Correct. Those are certainly the objectives. I think, again, going back to the education component, the wayfinding possibly, if we could do something in that area as far as where the parking is. I know one thing that I've thought about recently was to call the property owners that own those parking lots and have discussions with them about the use of their spaces, because I know there's some parking lots that absolutely are not going to allow people to park in those parking lots. But I would hope there would be some flexibility there through discussion, and usually it all leads back to money. So that's another component that we have to address somehow. How are we going to do that? And I don't have the answer for that.
I was just going to ask you for your suggestion, because you face the public and the business owners every day. So I think we have to be proactive and have some sort of a game plan.
Oh, I agree. I agree we have to be
And so
proactive.
that game plan has to be defined, and we have to have a strategy to ensure that parking does not become a turnoff. And we know that we want to develop downtown living. With downtown living, you're not going to be able to do it if you can't secure parking spots for the people who are living, whether they buy a loft, rent a loft, or whatever the issue is. So
Mayor Gunner,
that becomes-
I want to be
please.
clear about something there. I don't think that a lot of the larger buildings, the high-rise buildings, are going to be developed unless there's parking immediate and proximal to it. So I think that's a separate issue than what Dell's talking about and what's been introduced here. But I don't think anyone's going to rent an apartment and have to walk a block to get to their space. They're going to want to be right next to it.
They do wish that, although I will tell you, in many urban cities, they do not park right by their building. They have to walk. Not all buildings in urban areas have parking garages next to them, so they've had to adapt as well. But there are at least adjacencies that provide for that. Yes. Go ahead.
As far as, as development happens and people are buying condos, it should be up to whoever's selling the condos to maybe designate and sell a parking spot. That's done in a lot of major cities, that they are purchasing parking off-site for the residents, and the residents are recompensating the developer.
This all comes
ahead,
down.
Travis.
This all comes down to feasibility. So, what can you command if you're selling condos if you have to walk 2 blocks to get to and from it? You're not going to get a fair price. You can't justify the feasibility of redeveloping that structure if you don't provide immediate and proximal parking, because that's what you're competing against in the rest of the community. So, I would say office and residential use specifically will require parking to be immediate and proximal. And I'll take the Spur building as an example. When the parking garage was closed on the Spur building, it cleared out the office building. It was done. It went to vacant. And it's because there was no parking. Everyone had to go to the street.
Well, there were other issues with the Spur building. It's the reason they left it, but parking is always an issue. But the Spur building had a lot of infrastructure issues within that building, which turned a lot of people off. All right, other comments?
Heidi Brooks, single-member District 5. So I grew up in Austin, downtown. Parking has always been a problem. They have continued to build parking lots, but it still continues to be a problem. There are ways when you have events of over 400 people to shuttle people to parking lots that are in another location. Education, setting up maps, Google Maps for parking lots. There are numerous ways to go about setting up additional parking in those events. I've lived here, I think, 37, maybe 38 years. There aren't that many events over 400 people. Quite honestly, I'd like to see our community having more things, bringing people in, that this became a problem. But I also hate the idea of people having to apply for another city permit to get parking and be denied the opportunity that might bring more people to San Angelo for an event. So education, shuttling people to public parking lots is an option. Thank you.
Further public comment? Okay, so the issue at hand is, John, you want to go through and talk through, further talk through, instead of just a general overview of what is presented here, so we better understand what we want to take action or no action on.
Well, unless there are questions, I mean, it's a pretty simple change to the ordinance that basically says, there's a part of the ordinance where it says parking is required per the charts and everything in the zoning ordinance. But then under that, there's an exception that says, except in the central business district, no parking is required. So what this proposal would do is add to that exception where it says, except in the central business district where no parking is required, it further would add, except for an assembly occupancy with over 400 occupants. That would require a parking plan be approved by city council. That's really the totality of the change.
So there wouldn't be, let's say, a fee attached to it, et cetera, so it would be simply turning in a parking plan attached to? I'm a little confused about the process here.
Yeah, and let me go back to that chart, but basically they would already be going through some type of development review process. So, and I got a question before the meeting, that this would not apply retroactively. Any existing businesses are grandfathered. It would only be somebody coming in with a brand new business or changing in the occupancy of an existing building, in which case they would already be going through either a building permit process or a change of occupancy process that we already have that they would be doing anyway. As part of that, once we identified it as an occupancy over 400, as part of that review process, we would say, oh, you also need this parking plan, and it will have to go and be approved by city council.
And that parking plan could be inclusive of what?
It would basically be them answering the question, how do you intend to provide parking for this facility? It could be an agreement with an adjacent property that there's a parking lot on to use that private parking. They could count some of the on-street spaces in front of their building, for example. There's really no limit. They would just have to provide something that would satisfy you all ultimately on
Does that
how are you-
include, would that also include asking permission to use city property? Because normally it's just open. So, I mean, if you said, as Dale said, down by the river, all of that is city property and all the parking is down there. So anybody can use it. So how could that become a part of a parking plan? Because it's open for anybody.
Well, again, the parking plan isn't necessarily requiring them to provide private parking. They could say, hey, I'm right next door to this city public lot. I would intend my customers to park in that public lot that's right next door. And then it would be up to you all to say, yeah, that's reasonable, or, well, no, that venue is too big. They would take up too much of that public parking spot for other people, so maybe they could count half of that parking or something. But the idea is to provide the flexibility that you all could approve it on a case-by-case rather than saying you have to provide X number of parking spaces, they have to be within 400 feet of your business, which is kind of what applies outside the downtown.
Okay. Questions, Larry?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. James, you suggested there was some kind of legal action in progress. Is that correct, or did I misread your statement?
You were
I don't
talking
recall
about,
saying
yeah,
that,
I
but-
think early on about maybe something with the state.
Because I don't believe anyone here is.
Oh, I think that was short-term rentals, that statement, not parking, maybe.
I think he might have just been offering comments about the discussion we'd already had regarding the lawsuit that happened in Austin that affected the notice provisions. I don't recall him saying anything about.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
probably
my initial
it.
comments were not about this item. They were about the general discussion of having the joint meeting.
Thank you.
Dale, you want to come back up?
So while Dale's coming up, John, let me ask you this. Is this just going to apply to venues? I'm having a hard time interpreting who this is going to affect and who it's not. Can somebody clarify that?
Yeah, again, the way the ordinance is written, it would be an assembly occupancy, which is defined in the building code, but basically means things like are listed there: event centers, bars, restaurants, churches, sport venues, basically anything where lots of people congregate. Those in the building code have different rules for fire sprinklers and all kinds of other things that meet that particular occupancy. That's different from, a shoe store or, some of the other types of businesses.
So how is this fair and equitable if it's coming before the city council for review, and you could maybe include some public parking or maybe some private parking and maybe some on-street? I don't see how you could apply a fair and equitable means of approving any project that's brought before you guys on the basis that's been presented. How do you do that?
Dale, you want to talk about what you think the right amount of education and how you would perceive moving forward so that you're not on a daily basis inundated with the calls and complaints from business owners?
Well, and again, this is, it gets into finance. There are ways you can hire consultants. I know I'm very anti-consultant. But in this particular case, one of the things I've learned through our Main Street program is that they hire consultants to help them create the wayfinding for parking areas. Also, studies as to how people interact or react to going into the downtown district. And that goes into even slowing the speeds downtown and how street lights operate. I mean, it goes into a much more extensive process. And so I know that those have proven to work in some of the cities that have applied that or taken that step. The other part of it is, again, just trying to treat each other in a friendly way. I mean, people get really upset. They get very upset when their neighbors or their neighbors' employees park in front of their stores, or vice versa. It happens, and we just need to try to. Most of the time, I'm facilitating those arguments, trying to get people to be rational with each other about where they park. But outside of that, Mayor, that's the only thing I can think of is really just digging deep into the weeds to figure out what is the best way to utilize and educate our public about parking spaces.
Thank you.
So,
Go ahead, Luke.
Let me ask you, I'm just thinking through how this would unfold. And let's just say that there is an event that is going to draw more than 400 people, and they need to put together a parking plan. In my mind, that creates an opportunity for someone who owns additional parking to charge people to park there. First of all, is the city going to allow that? Since we're putting the requirement now on the person putting that event in place, who's responsible to pay for that parking? And secondly, if they can't afford to pay for that parking and no one around them is willing to provide it, is that not just going to crush the event and basically make it to where they can't have it?
Well, and let me clarify that this is not intended for special events. So like a one-time weekend event downtown, that has its own process. This is really for something like an event center that they host parties and weddings every weekend and all of the time.
Okay, so what if someone comes in and says, half of our parking is going to be private. We're going to use this parking lot next door. And then that building sells, and the new owner says, you can't park on my parking lot anymore. What do we do then?
We would typically, for an alternative parking plan, which we already have an alternative parking plan process, we would require an agreement of some sort between those two property owners. Now, again, agreements don't run forever, and so that might, it could run out in 5 years or whatever. We typically wouldn't grant that if it was like a one-year agreement. It would have to be a longer-term type of agreement. But again, as we've written this, it would be up to the city council to decide. And to answer your earlier question, the idea here was to provide that flexibility, because as soon as we start saying you have to have 200 parking spaces, they have to be within 400 feet, somebody's going to come in and say, well, I've got a whole parking lot that the guy's going to lease me or I own 4 blocks away, and I think that's sufficient. This gives that flexibility for city council to make that judgment call. Is that sufficient?
So in your list of examples, you have bars, restaurants, and churches. So we've grandfathered all the bars, restaurants, and churches that are downtown. But if someone wants to open a new restaurant downtown and the occupant load is 400 or greater, they're going to be under a different set of rules than everyone else that's been downtown already. That doesn't seem fair and equitable. And if I was a new business owner and I had to go before the city council and answer questions about parking that no one else before them had to answer, that would upset me. I don't think that's fair. And I think that it maybe the most damaging part of this idea is the discouragement of development downtown. And we're all trying to make improvements downtown. Yes, we have parking problems. It's a very complicated and thorny issue. I just don't think that the idea of introducing another review panel discussion in front of city council to arbitrarily award a venue some permission to continue, and then another guy comes in and, well, no, we don't like your idea. It just doesn't work. It's not consistent. And I think when it comes to city ordinance and rules, you have to be fair and equitable. This doesn't feel fair and equitable to me.
I understand that concern. I'll make a couple of points. One, anytime you change the rules are different for the new people versus the old people. So,
not necessarily.
The second thing I would say, though, is we looked at this. The idea was based on a concern of very large event venues. So right now, based on information we got from the fire marshal's office, there's only one bar in downtown that this would even apply to, and no restaurants. Right. So that occupancy was set at 400 to really get only the largest uses. Like I said, only one bar and no restaurants would this apply to of all of the bars and restaurants in downtown now. So it wasn't intended as a rule that would apply to every new bar and restaurant. And you all could tweak that number. You could go even higher. You could limit it. You could exclude bars and restaurants.
What's the point? Yeah. If we're going to write an ordinance, but we're going to make it a number that is just not going to apply to anybody, why are we wasting our time?
I think the concern is we've had some folks approach us about large-scale event venues that would host things like weddings or parties that would be 400, 500, 600 people. And so I think that's the concern.
So like a church?
Like a building that is remodeled, perhaps, and for the specific purpose of doing it, so they wouldn't run a business day in and day out, but would be on a very specific issue. And Luke, to your comment about parking lots, on many big events, whether it's July 3rd events or whether it's big concerts in downtown, if you've been down there during those events, you will find that everyone who has a private parking lot surrounding the river stage all has private parking signs up, and they also have signs that say $5, and they hire somebody to be there and monitor that parking lot and charge a fee for parking that. And many of the businesses surrounding that do that currently. That's part of it.
I don't necessarily think there's a problem with that. I guess what my question was.
Well, no, that's what we're saying, yeah.
If there's a parking plan that's required, can that not be considered part of your plan?
No, it is. I mean, that's the point.
But you don't own the property.
No, but the person who wanted to have the event would negotiate with that private property owner to use that facility and even say to them, if you want to put a sign up and say, you know, it's $5 to come park here, you would be allowed to do that, but that would be a negotiation between the two parties. Yes, Karen?
Travis, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what if that property owner that has the parking lot says, you know, I thought $5 was reasonable, but I'm going to raise it to $25 going
The
forward.
private property right
And
owner,
now
we
we've got,
could do
and
that.
now we have this issue with people upset and they don't want to pay that and they're not going to use that lot. So the plan that's in place in agreement with the city council isn't actually being implemented and utilized because you have private property disruption and change that's affecting the execution of the idea that's brought before the city council for one-time discussion when it's approved. Things change too much downtown to have an arbitrary discussion on how a venue is going to park their facility and expect it to remain that way for 10 years or 15 years. It changes too much. I think we all want to see the change. And so I just don't see the benefit. I understand the concern about parking. I don't see the benefit of having to go through a process in front of city council to approve a venue for moving forward. The other very important point I'm going to make here is that if you're a venue and you're downtown and parking is a problem, you better solve the parking problem yourself if you want to be successful. No one's going to go and book that venue if everyone that goes to it has to park 3 or 4 blocks away, or they have to park on the street with bars and restaurants that are lined and busy at the time that the event's being held. It's their responsibility as a private business owner to find a way to accommodate their customers. So whether it's valet parking or shuttle service, as was mentioned before, there are solutions to this problem that I think don't require the review and approval of the city council.
I'm not so sure it should come to city council. I would think that would be something that could be done administratively and planning and not city council approval.
I think what John's proposing
but-
is to bring it to the city council.
I know, but we're talking
Mayor.
about options.
Okay.
That's what the discussion is. What are the ideas and solutions that could be put out there? He proposed something. We don't have to accept the proposal. It can be changed any way we want to, if we choose to, or table it until there's a better plan. There are many options here.
Mayor, I believe also that, again, when someone applies for a new construction or development of a business, that it would trigger, the occupancy would trigger the idea of having a parking plan, and that could be discussed as to how they're going to come to a conclusion on that. And I totally agree with the administrative process, looking at it from that perspective, because it speeds up and everybody knows at that point in time and the impact that it's going to have in their plans to develop their venue. And so I would hope that we could come to that kind of a conclusion.
Karen, you wanted to say something?
I'm willing to let Travis go ahead. I think I have more of a summary.
The only other question, if it's administrative, can the staff, can the planning director say, you can't build this venue because you don't have an adequate parking plan? And what are the rules?
Right, then they would
What are the
appeal.
rules for that?
Yeah, then they would appeal.
Typically, an admin process like that would have an appeal to either planning commission or council.
Is there a framework of rules for establishing the parking requirements, or is it arbitrary to you or to someone on the staff? The issue is the same no matter who reviews and approves it, whether it comes to the city council or it's done administratively. It is the arbitrary nature of the idea that is the problem.
Sure. And we would typically develop a policy of what things we would look for in a plan and what things would count and not count and how many spaces we would generally want to see. But
I think at this point, what I hear is there's too many issues, challenges, and questions to take some sort of action on it. I think the action that probably should be taken today is to table it and answer a lot of the questions and determine whether it is possible, not possible, challenges that have come up, how do we address those challenges and make sure it is equitable. and leave it as a tabled item. I'll need somebody to
Make a motion, we table this.
Okay. With that, any further public comment?
We will also
Yeah,
need
we
action by
actually
the
need
planning
action by the
commission.
planning commission as
Okay.
well.
Well, that's the city councils, and then we have the planning commission.
Planning commission typically essentially goes first, so they can make a recommendation to
Yeah,
council.
we just tabled that. Erase that from the cameras. And Heidi, go ahead.
Well, I hope that if it is tabled and there is further discussion, there is plenty of information out for the public, those who own property in downtown, to be there at those meetings to voice their opinions.
Okay, thank you.
I will
Teresa.
make my comment if I could.
Go ahead.
So per Teresa's recent remark, I believe that legally we can't take action unless the Planning Commission has rendered what's termed a final report. So you do have a quorum, so regardless, you do have a quorum, but are you comfortable rendering any kind of final report without all your members present? And I would argue it's maybe time to wait.
Yeah, my issue with this is if we table it, I believe we have to specify when we're going to hear it again if it's tabled
Well,
as part of the Open Meetings Act. So
you either have to
we could
table
deny it, we could deny it and have it brought back before us, and then there is no time frame on it if that's.
Well, there's two options with tabling. One, you can table it to a date specific. If you don't do that and you just generally table it, then whenever it comes back, new notice would be required, is the only difference.
Well, because sorry, John, because of the unique nature of this situation and the joint meeting, it is our preference, Brandon and I, we had a quick conversation, that in order for it to be rescheduled, more action is taken by council, calling another joint meeting and providing what kind of notice has to happen in that case. So we wouldn't table it to a date specific, we would table it until council takes action to recall a second meeting. But I think going back to Karen's point, the Planning Commission does need to take independent action prior to council voting.
Right, so so you're saying that on the Open Meetings Act, I can table it into the future without specifying when it's going to be heard again?
That's really not an Open Meetings Act requirement.
I think it's more for the zoning cases, so you don't have to send out additional notice because you've already noticed it, and then at the meeting, if you table it to a date certain, then that notice is still good.
Obviously, I have a problem with notice as it stands, so I would like for notice to go again, no matter when this comes up. So
In that case, you should just table.
I'm inclined to deny it and just have it brought before us again, but I'm gonna refer to my colleagues to make a motion.
So I guess I'll make some comments that just probably tag on to what has already been said somewhat, but I don't have so much of an issue with this case because it's basically a text amendment. It's not retroactive. However, I mean, whether it's allowable or illegal, I still don't think it's appropriate. This is something that we deal with every month on the Planning Commission. We have people come in, they're frustrated, they don't understand what's happening, they don't feel like they've been given adequate time to understand and ask the questions, especially in zoning cases. And it's something that we talked about at length last Monday, that we need to give a lot of consideration to the process of notification that we are currently using. And I feel like this meeting is actually 2 steps backward from that, giving less notification and eliminating the time frame between the Planning Commission meeting and the City Council meeting, where many times maybe they missed the Planning Commission meeting or didn't understand quite what was going to happen. We make a recommendation that goes to the City Council. They still have 2 weeks in most cases to come and make their case in front of City Council. So I know I'm beating a dead horse. I think it's been talked about quite a bit. I don't like the process. As far as this case goes, I'd make a motion to deny, but I'd like to hear what you guys think too.
I mean, I would easily second your denial.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to deny. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
So that's 4-1 from the Planning Commission.
Or 3-1. There's your fourth one?
Fourth. Sam.
Oh, sorry.
4-1 to
Sam.
deny.
We didn't see you over there.
And just to note, this may not be necessary, but since this does come as a denial recommendation, it would take a supermajority of the council to approve anything, if you choose to take action.
But in normal, so if they've denied it, it still comes to city council. I want to make sure, step one, that everything that's been brought up from a legal notice perspective is legal. I don't want to get down the road and then have somebody tell us it was illegal, mishandled, not done legally,
Mayor,
complications.
it's really more than that, and I agree that it's important to know that it's legal, but the only notice that was sent out for this meeting was a little blurb in the classified ads of the newspaper. That's it. There were no signs put in the yard as a normal zoning case would require. What's the other measure? Mailing. The mailing of notices to property owners and everyone around them. None of that was done for this meeting. These items are minor relative to the business that we could hear in a meeting like this, and it's very dangerous, in my opinion, to hold meetings like this and hear zoning matters that impact our entire community, especially if the only notice is a little blurb in the newspaper that no one takes anymore.
Harry?
Just want to remind people that the city has a website. Public information is out there. This was published last Thursday, and so citizens have that opportunity, even if they don't take the newspaper. So maybe we need to look at not publishing it in the newspaper anymore because that's not a great venue.
I think
But
we're required.
This information information is out there for the public every week.
Brian?
I want to also throw out there that we.
And you are who?
I'm Brian
And what do
Groves.
you
I'm
do?
the
What district
Brian
is
Groves.
that
I'm
in?
the communications manager.
What district?
District 6. Thank you.
Joking.
And so, because of the city council meeting, this went out to every media partner that we have contact with. Was published to the website. Was published to all of our social media accounts. So it wasn't just the newspaper. It was everything else that we do with city council meetings.
Okay.
And if I could just piggyback onto that, if this had been done 6 months ago, this exact same notices that we did for this meeting would have been the notices that we did. For an ordinance amendment like this, we've never put signs in yards, we've never sent out mailed notices because it's never been required. So I understand, and Travis and I have had those conversations about how we can do more, and we're working on a plan to do more for notices for folks. But I just don't want anybody to leave this room thinking we've done less than we would have done for this ordinance amendment, because we've done the same as we would have done. Other than, and I understand the point about you don't have 2 meetings in 2 weeks to come back. That's a fair point.
Well, and that's why I initially said I'm not so concerned about item 4A. It's 4B, that's the zoning change that bothers me.
And we'll deal with that when we get there. But this is 4A. So the other issue is whether it is legally or what is required, it's what is right. And we want to make sure that what we do is right regardless of what is required. And I think we need to be sure that what we do is right for the citizens. And I also say the following: if in fact few people take home delivery on the newspaper, many people do the Standard Times online, and many people have switched from home delivery to that means of getting the local information. If in fact we feel like because of a lack of home delivery, which has happened in every community, what have other communities done to ensure that the citizens have been adequately notified? Because this lack of home delivery is not unique to San Angelo, Texas. And yet other people have to make sure that all the legal notices, and even if it's not legal, that the adequate notice has been put out there.
And just to reiterate, we're researching what other cities are doing, and we plan to bring back both to the Planning Commission and Council some ideas for how we do notice in the future.
And I don't know what the subscription level is for Go San Angelo, as well as San Angelo Live. I'm not sure San Angelo Live prints anything as it relates to notices for zoning / anything else. So that we might better understand what they can or cannot do, or will not do. All right, with that, go ahead.
Matthews, District 5. I do want to, I mean, what you're saying is absolutely right. It's about trying to notify in the best efforts that the city can bring the people together to make their decisions and provide their feedback. I'd agree to that. There's a couple of things that I think might open up the legal problems that have just been said so far. And this is one of the reasons why we need to have 2 meetings. So, because I'm over here thinking about all this stuff, and I only have 10 minutes to prepare what I'm going to say, but
3 minutes.
3
Or,
yeah. But there's a couple of things. I mean, there's 2 meetings, so we need to have 2 different places where people
Are
can.
your comments specific to the motion? Because they need to be specific to the motion on the table.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm going to come back though.
We'll have another item you can come talk to. So there is a motion. Travis, you go ahead and finish up what you need to do. It's been passed, so now it comes back to City Council, correct?
Yes, the Planning Commission has denied or recommended denial of the item, so now it's to the City Council. Again, it would require a supermajority if you were to pass something.
So the motion should be that we deny this.
Deny it, it won't come back for, 6 months? Yes. So what we've done in the past, whenever Planning Commission wants to continue working on something and they deny it and it comes back to you, then you just direct Planning Commission to continue their work and you don't take action on it. And I think that's probably the best option here. If you take any action, you're stuck with it for 6 months, so.
All right, so we could take a motion, we can make a motion that says we want the Planning Commission to continue to work on this item and figure out if there is a better, more specific or non-specific or whatever attached to this concept, and involve Del Velasquez, who's in charge of downtown, and see if they can come up with, through John James' office, a better, more detailed plan of action. So that motion would be what?
So I'll second what you just said.
Well, we
I'll
don't-
second what
That's
you
a
just said.
second.
Do we have
Got
to
it.
even take a motion, Teresa? We just direct
them
the
direction.
planning
You don't need
commission
planning
to,
commission,
we
you
don't,
need planning.
One
just tell
person
them.
speak at a time.
Well, I think you at least need to come to some consensus that that's what everybody wants done, because there is still the opportunity to take formal motion and deny or approve it, but at least consensus gathering, I think, is appropriate.
So is that a motion, Tom?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second whatever his motion was. Y'all keep working on it.
I'll finish it up.
Mayor, I want to zoom to 100,000 feet. And this, I guess, would be hopefully for the benefit of the Planning Commission. I'm sitting here listening to the discussion, and I think it would depend on the individual making the comment, but the question just keeps circling through my mind, talking about the parking, this specific issue. Do we have a problem today? Or are we anticipating a problem in the future that we need to deal with?
The issue is trying to be proactive, I believe.
Okay. And then, okay, if something is adopted, I don't care whether it's 200, 400, 800, what will change today or what will change in the future? I'm having a little, I am thick-headed. I will be the first to admit that. I'm having a little trouble wrapping my brain around this whole thing. Do we really have a problem here? I don't want to be snarky. I really don't, but the question's going to sound snarky, so forgive me before I ever ask the question. But it's, is this a solution looking for a problem?
It's trying to find a solution for a potential problem down the road. And we might say, there isn't one, just let it go. But we're going to leave it in the hands of Del Velasquez, John James, and the Planning Commission to try to figure it out. Okay. We're not figuring it out today. We're just supporting the fact that we're not doing anything on it today. With that, we'll take a vote. All in favor of Tom Thompson's motion? No, he said, I make that motion, and Tommy seconded it.
Steal my thunder, Daniel, please. All in favor, let's vote.
All in favor of Tom Thompson's motion and Tommy's second, say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone in denial? There is not. Planning Commission, Del Velasquez, you got a lot of work to do with John James and get something talked through. You might not have an issue, might not have a plan, might say it's going to take a while, but you got work to do. Thank you. Do we need to take a break, or you want to just keep on moving?
The second one.
What did you say, Tommy?
I said, let's take a quick break, but that doesn't matter. We can keep going, whatever.
We got a lot of people in the audience
Okay.
for this part, so let's go ahead and
Keep going.
continue, because I think it's going to be a long one.
Okay.
Knowing that, everybody's going to be a long one, so do you want a break? Nope.
Just like a little bit more coffee if
Go
there's
get
some
it.
in the back.
Take 2 seconds, yeah, right back here. Come back here. Just go out that door, back
Take a
there.
left.
Take a left, Travis. Here, I'll hold the door for you.
Travis, there's a little cup where you put a quarter in it.
Have them anymore, they put buildings on them.
Weren't they building that one?
I'll leave you, Terry.
Even though I've asked.
Oh, is it squishy or?
(9:55), we are calling this, I guess we never adjourned officially, but we are back in session right now at 9:55, and we will move on to item B, discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending Chapter 12, Planning and Development, Exhibit A, Zoning Ordinance, Article 4, Specific Use Standards, Section 406, Bed and Breakfast Establishments and Short-Term Rentals regarding removal of the requirement that short-term rentals be separated by 500 feet except in RS zoning districts. And John, you're on.
Thank you. Again, John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. This item is, well, you may recall when we adopted the short-term rental ordinance, there was a concern of having too many short-term rentals close together in the neighborhoods. And so the ordinance we adopted required a separation of 500 feet between any two short-term rentals. What we didn't anticipate was how we should have written that is that applies within the neighborhoods, within single-family areas, which was what the concern was. But as we actually wrote the ordinance, it applied everywhere throughout the city. So even in districts like downtown or a commercial district, places that already allow hotels that could have 200 rooms, we wouldn't allow two short-term rentals next door to each other. And so we're trying to remedy that by rewording that provision in the ordinance. It's really just a change to one or two sentences that makes that 500-foot separation requirement only apply to RS zoning districts, which would be single-family and duplex type districts.
So it's a very specific change to the existing ordinance. It does not change today what happens in a residential area.
That's correct. If you're in a single-family neighborhood, this is no change to the ordinance. It simply removes the restriction of a 500-foot separation in those other districts. So in apartment districts, downtown, commercial, industrial areas could all have short-term rentals within 500 feet of each other.
So if you're, let's say, on Knickerbocker, your business is, but within one house, you're in a residential area. what happens?
Let me confirm before I answer that, but
Because what we don't
Depends on the
want
zoning.
is the short-term rentals moving further and further into a residential area because we use the word commercial, and commercial on whether you're talking Knickerbocker, Bryant Boulevard, or Beauregard. There's that half of a block that could be 500 feet from commercial to residential, and I think that creates great concern.
yeah, I think the idea is if you're in a commercial area that would allow a whole wide range of uses like hotels, apartments, car washes, all kinds of those things, you could also have a short-term rental. So yes, you might have a short-term rental next door to a house that has single-family zoning next to that commercial, but the commercial area is already designated for higher intensity uses anyway.
That will create the biggest heartburn for people, is when you start, because there are commercial areas really adjacent to residential areas, and I don't think people want their residential area impacted by short-term rentals because they're directly off of a already designated commercial.
And just to clarify, John, it is the underlying zoning that dictates these changes. So it would have to be commercially zoned to allow for a to remove this 500-foot requirement.
That's correct.
Residential zone lots are not affected by what the staff is proposing. So it is the zoning. If there's a commercially zoned lot in the middle of a neighborhood, that lot would not have this 500-foot provision within it, and you could put a short-term rental on it.
And that's the heartburn.
Yes.
We also have different areas of town that have homes built on general heavy commercial lots. And they are still homes, but that was zoned later on after the homes were built. So if this passes, then each one of those homes, one block in particular, there are about 6 homes, and they're building a quadplex soon. Every one of those could be a short-term rental. Is that correct?
Well, number one, that is correct. Number two, that could also be a hotel. It could also be a mechanic shop, an auto body shop, all kinds of things that I think staff believes would be much more obnoxious than a short-term rental. So that I guess our thinking was, if you can have an auto body shop, why not allow a short-term rental on that same property?
So RM zoned lots are affected by this removal of the 500-foot area. RS zone lots are not affected in your proposal. Is that correct?
That is correct, but I'll point out that the way the ordinance is written, you can't have a short-term rental on a lot that's within 500 feet of another lot with a short-term rental. So even under our current ordinance, 2 apartments in an apartment complex could be short-term rentals. That same 500-foot separation, it doesn't apply today, but that wouldn't change under this ordinance either.
Right. And are hotels currently in violation of our ordinance?
No, because hotels are defined differently than short-term rentals.
Okay. Thank you.
But again, we're basically saying any place you can have a hotel, you could have multiple short-term rentals, is kind of the underlying justification for
If
this.
I owned the lot behind the parking lot of a hotel, I could put up 8 townhouses and turn them into short-term rentals.
Well, no, actually, assuming it's townhouse zoning is one of the RS districts. So single-family duplex, townhouses, patio homes, all of those are in one of the 3 RS districts that we have.
However, if you had them already built and it was zoned commercial, you could do that.
Okay, so I think we have a lot of people here today to speak towards this item. And before we have further discussion up here, I'm going to have the public come up and comment, and then Planning Commission, City Council can talk through some of the issues that were brought up to make sure everyone's clear about what's happening here. So anyone in the audience today who would like to come forward and talk on this item, please come forward.
Morning.
I'm Diane Bays, 3544 Black Buck Trail. I'm also the vice president of the Destination Marketing Organization that is fully funded by hotel tax dollars. So I would ask that if indeed you are going to allow short-term rentals to be in effect in our community in this way, we have 6 what you would consider short-term rentals on our website currently who have visitors pay hotel tax dollars locally. The other 40 plus that are also part of our community already, according to a report I received from about Airbnbs and short-term rentals, do not. So if you are going to zone these areas, I would ask that we have city staff reach out to those organizations to ask them to have visitors pay that hot tax dollar, because otherwise those buildings or those short-term rentals are getting that benefit of our marketing and are not paying towards it.
I think the city at one last 2 meetings or so ago, we said we were doing a review of all of those, right? So Tina, you want to come talk to that? Because I think we created an assessment or an evaluation or a review of all of that so that everyone who does do short-term rentals or Airbnb would have to be paying into the hotel motel tax.
That's correct, Mayor. Tina Diersky, Director of Finance. We are currently in the middle of a hotel tax audit, auditing a sample of hotels in San Angelo. We did include some STRs with that audit. We are further going out for an additional audit just of STRs. We'll be bringing that contract back to you soon to City Council for approval.
I think we need to better define short-term rental versus Airbnb, because at the time this short-term rental ordinance became an ordinance, we didn't have so much Airbnb business, and today a lot of people are doing Airbnb and they're not short-term rentals. So we need to clarify all of that.
Well, our ordinance does have a definition of both B&B, and we have very few bed and breakfast. They're all short-term rentals, and basically it's any home that you rent for a period of less than 30 days is a short-term rental.
I'm sorry, we're talking there's a lot of confusion here. So Airbnb and short-term rental, in my mind, are the same.
Yes, under our ordinance.
A bed and breakfast is not the same.
That's correct.
Okay.
Just to be clear, because there are a lot of people here listening and here for a reason.
Heidi Brooks, SMD 5 again. And to be clear, total transparency, my husband and I have properties in downtown, including downtown, and we discussed this morning, had either one of us received any kind of notice regarding this? Was there a notice sent out?
There was not.
Okay.
We often, I mean, in a case like this, when we're expanding what's allowed, rather than restricting it, there's generally less of a concern about those kinds of issues.
What is the legal expectation
and again,
for notification?
Again, as I said in the previous item, had this been done 6 months ago or a year ago, we would have done the exact same notice as we did today. We have never sent notices out about ordinance amendments that apply to large, if we're changing the rules in a whole zoning district, we've never sent a letter to every person in that zoning district.
Okay, so my point isn't what happened 6 months ago. I'm hoping that, and I go to a lot of these meetings, I sat on planning and zoning. I talk to my SMD representative on a regular basis. The point is, and I think a lot of us feel this way, we keep getting left out, and by the time we are aware of this, it's too late for us to do our legal work, to hire attorneys or whatever it takes to know that we're in the right of this. I sat at a planning and zoning meeting not long ago where the whole Ratliff area neighborhood had no clue as to what was going on because of the direction that things happen. There isn't enough time to know what's happening and to do anything about it. The idea of posting things in the classified area, it should really be posted on the front page of the newspaper, although that doesn't even get read anymore. I don't know what the answer is, but we have a lot of people that don't go online, go access the computer, and even know how to manage the computer when they get to that page to find what meeting is happening, when it's happening, and what is taking place. I'm just asking for more transparency in these kind of things.
Yeah, and John, I do have, I want a clarification. In the past, I believe the Planning Commission has heard matters like this as it relates to changes in zoning, and then that recommendation goes to the City Council for 2 readings. Is that correct?
That's correct. And now, as I mentioned earlier, in this case, that is exactly what happened because you all, as the Planning Commission, heard this item on May 16th and made a recommendation for approval. Now, it was combined with another item, which was the more controversial of the two, which you may recall. But this did get a recommendation of approval. You tabled one and approved this one.
Okay, so just to finish, I'm sorry, just to finish my thought. So in the prior process, Planning Commission meeting, 2 weeks, City Council, second reading, City Council. Now, this is the first time in my life that I've heard of a joint meeting between the Planning Commission and City Council. There may be folks in the room that have seen this done before, but not in my lifetime. So now it is once in this meeting of both boards, and then a second reading at City Council, and it's done. So we've, as Luke alluded to earlier, we've reduced the notice and time frame window that people have to object or express concerns about changes that we're making to the zoning. This speaks to the problem that we've got, guys. We're going in the wrong direction with meetings like this if we don't give the public the opportunity to have input and involvement. And this meeting does that by taking away 2 weeks of what would otherwise be time for people to rally troops and show up to a city council meeting.
And I'll address that briefly. We've talked with, and hopefully legal will confirm this, we've talked about even though this court case has basically told us we have to have these joint meetings in certain circumstances, there's
What
nothing
case
that...
was that about? You're saying that, but tell us what that background is.
City of Austin made some significant changes to their zoning ordinance. There was a citizen group that sued them, basically saying you should have sent out notice because the state statute requires notice. The city said, no, that's only required when you're rezoning property, not when you're changing the text of an ordinance. And basically the court said, no, if you're changing the text of an ordinance in a way that affects individual properties, then you have to send those notices. Yet there's a separate provision in the statute and in our code that says in order to not have to send those notices, in this case to 2,000 or 10,000 homes, you can have a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and City Council, and that way you don't have to send those individual notices. But our plan moving forward for these, even if we have to have these joint meetings, is to still take the item to Planning Commission first, have you all discuss it at a Planning Commission. We'll still have to come to a joint meeting of City Council and Planning Commission, but we won't eliminate that first step of the Planning Commission.
So did this all go to the Planning Commission first?
This one did. The first one didn't, but in the future, we'll take everything to the Planning Commission first, and then only then would we take it to a joint meeting of City Council and Planning Commission to avoid that concern that Travis just raised.
Going back to what Travis said, and I'm sure we all kind of feel this way.
Talking to the microphone, if you would, please.
I feel like every planning meeting that we have, we go back and we discuss notifications. And even though this may seem like a small text amendment in the grand scheme of things on your side, to the citizens, the taxpayers, to them, this isn't a small deal, and it's lack of transparency by the city, which I don't agree with at all. And I'm sure that I've got common consensus.
I guess I don't want to be argumentative, but I want to push back on that concern a little bit, and Brian mentioned it. I would be happy, anybody in this room, and the citizens included, that have ideas, please let us know, because we put it in the newspaper as required by law. It goes to all our media partners. We can't put things on the front page of the paper, but we can sure send it to them. We can't put it on the nightly news, but we send it to them. We put it on our website. It goes out on Facebook. and I don't even know what else, Instagram, all the other things that we have. We're doing everything we know of to do, and if you all have thoughts, and we're looking for ideas on how else we can get the word out. I would say on the case that Travis mentioned earlier, the gentleman who was concerned we were zoning his property without him getting notice, he was at the meeting. He saw the sign we put in the yard. So that's one type of notice we didn't mention, but we put signs out on properties. And so he was aware of it. He was at the meeting and was able to put his words before the commission to help them make a decision. So
The problem with that specific person and that specific
Mayor,
case.
We're kind of getting away from what the actual item is, and I understand your comments are important, and y'all could talk about that, but we are kind of getting off agenda, going too much into detail about notice on other cases. But this problem is going to get worse instead of better as long as that case is out there and still standing. My office talked to Austin. They have
Doesn't have to.
Well, we need to, unless we make different decisions. Whenever we send that resolution to council to call these meetings, that's the point where notice needs to get addressed. And the last meeting I think that we had joint between these two bodies was in March of 2020. So they're not familiar, they're not common. We don't want them to be common, but they're not unheard of either. This has happened 3 or 4 times since I've been here since, I don't know how long, 7 years. So they're not uncommon meetings. They do happen, last time in 2020. But because of this case, they're going to become more frequent. So John's plea for input into how we...
Did you say March of 2020?
Yeah, I think it was March 3rd.
I don't think, since I've been mayor, which is 2017, that I have attended a joint meeting. That's what my
That was right
recollection
before
is.
COVID. I don't recall that meeting.
We were upstairs.
It was upstairs.
We
We're
were
upstairs.
And it was in my
Yeah.
district when
Yeah.
they rezoned and we overturned something that they brought. We did have that.
So in any case,
My memory's not
I think
good.
that the conversation about what kind of notice is appropriate is a very important one. It's something we talk about. We put things on the agenda. We have these grand plans to inform the public, and nobody comes. If anybody has ideas, I think that's very valid. But what the law requires, one, is that publication in the paper. That problem's going to get worse and not better, because the timeline for us when we give something to the paper to publish it is no longer 2 days. It's up to a week now. So that's going to extend a lot of these cases when, developers and people are pushing us. This is a very important conversation, but I'd kind of like to get back to what is on the agenda regarding the STRs as much as
The
possible.
only point I want to make, Teresa, is that you're right. We have to follow the minimum guidelines that the state outlines as a community. That doesn't mean that that's all that we have to do.
That's exactly
And
what
we
I
need to
said.
do more, is the argument that I think everyone on the Planning Commission would make based on the input and interaction that we're having with the citizens of our community over zoning cases.
Staff agrees.
I think everybody wants the most transparency possible, and we want to make sure from a legal perspective, we have done the correct thing. And what's up, Dale?
Just an anecdotal story. I was talking to an individual not too long ago that's lived all their life in San Angelo. I think they've left San Angelo one time to go to Rowena. And we were talking, and I said, yeah, you ought to go to ML Eddy's. And he went, ML Eddy's? Where's that? And I said, downtown. He said, you're kidding. And I said, no, it's been here for about 15, 20 years and started a long time ago. He goes, I didn't know ML Eddy's was downtown. So, folks, to the point that we're trying to make sure that a lot of people know what's going on, the individual needs to find out what's going on. I think the city does a great job of notifying people about what's going on, and there's just some people that are not going to pay attention. Sorry.
To that point, I have, Ms. Hattie's has been in business since late 1997, and I still have people walk in the door and say, how long have you been here? I've never been here, and they live in the city. So I'm not sure what the plan would be to make sure everybody reads everything and is notified of everything, but today we need to make sure that 2 things. What we're doing is legal. There are no issues from a legal perspective of this proceeding. And if there isn't, then we need to continue with the business at hand.
Spencer Matthews, District 5, and to that point, I think there are some troubling things that are being brought up, which I'm going to state as a way to say that I think somebody should motion just to deny this or to cancel this meeting at this point and save us a lot of time, because there's some things like the 10,000 notices going out, and you said that that does not need to happen because something comes back that might delay the process or offset the process. Well, that's the point. We need to delay the process if something comes back because people are trying to have their opinions heard. And so if that were to be brought up in a legal sense, best efforts will be brought up in a court case, and that's not best efforts if it's the precedent before and then all of a sudden different. That's not best efforts. And then there's several other things like the notice going out in the paper before the city council voted on it. That could be a violation of an Open Meetings Act because you're saying that you understood that the vote would happen and you published something before that vote actually happened, that the meeting would happen. And so
Meeting notice is to discuss what is going to be discussed. It's not a meeting that says this is how it was voted on. It is notification of a future meeting and the discussion of what that meeting will be.
Right, but the city council had to vote for this meeting to happen before, after the fact, the notice went out to notice everybody that the meeting was going to happen. See what I mean? That the meeting was
The point
actually
he's
voted
making
on.
is that the resolution that the city council adopted to have this meeting was made after the notice was put in the paper that the meeting was going to occur.
Are we legal?
I think technically we're legal, but doing it that way is not best practice. It's not making me really comfortable, and I think it is open to challenge to do that. So I think there's going to be other issues, but on notice, you're always open to challenge. I mean, that's the thing. You'll ask me, will we be sued over this? You can be sued over notice issues all day long. It's whether or not we can defend it. Is it defensible? Probably. Is it going to be an issue in the future? Maybe, depending on how this turns out. There seems to be a number of concerns about lots of things about this particular meeting. From the fact that there's not a separation between Planning Commission on this item, there was discussion at Planning Commission to when you guys are hearing it for the first time. Again, in the future, that's going to be more common because when we have these big plan amendments that require 10,000 notices, I just don't think there's any way we can do that because, again, as he said, that if one of those people in that 10,000 did not get their notice, they would have a valid complaint to invalidate the action you take. And so it's just such a big risk that doing these joint meetings is the more legally defensible way to do that. But I think they have a valid concern about the way notice was. Is it lawful? A court will decide that. But I think there's a number of issues on this item. I would recommend you continue discussing this item, and again, like the last one, see how you feel at the end of the discussion. But
Best efforts we brought up in those kind of cases. You have to make best efforts, and that's what will be discussed from an attorney's perspective. And if you didn't send out notice in a mailing because you're afraid of having a negative objection coming back, best efforts weren't made.
The statute
Thank you very
specifically
much.
allows us to not do that kind of notice. That's the whole point of.
What we're going to
the
do
section.
today is all the people in the audience who would like to speak to this subject are going to be allowed to speak to this subject. It will give direction and a thought process to this amendment to the ordinance. I don't want people to have come here and wasted their time. I want to hear from them, and we'll make a decision about what to do about it after we hear from everybody.
Okay, and speaking to this subject, it is my understanding that there was communication about this in the downtown area, but there was not communication about this in the entire city of San Angelo. Is that correct?
That was my understanding, and the email that we received, all of us on the Planning Commission received from John on June 30th, specified that the short-term rental was in downtown only. John has since indicated that at a Planning Commission meeting at some point in the past, we voted in favor of what's being proposed now. It was not to my, I don't recall that. I don't.
Do we have
I don't have
minutes
any
from that
memory of
meeting?
that. I remember talking about having it downtown. I don't remember it citywide.
Do we have
Yes,
minutes
that-
from that meeting that
Yes, I
indicate
can-
it was done?
I have verified and went back to the documents from that meeting. What they voted on was exactly what's before you today. It wasn't just limited to downtown. I think part of the confusion may be that at the meeting, downtown was the largest part of that discussion because there are currently short-term rentals proposed for downtown that this amendment was trying to address. And so the discussion at the Planning Commission was largely about downtown, but the ordinance amendment that they voted on was larger than just downtown.
So it included the entire city.
With the exception of RS zoning, yes.
I guess I'm confused then. If we've already discussed this and taken action on it, why are we doing it again?
It's back to that issue of we had two choices under state law. We could do a joint meeting, or we could send out 10,000 notices and spend $5,000 to $8,000 doing that of taxpayer money to send out letters to.
Was the action that we took previously invalid? Is that the problem?
No, that action wasn't invalid, but in order to not have to send 10,000 letters out to all of those property owners, the alternative under state law is to hold a joint meeting of Planning Commission and City Council.
So because we're in the same situation, I'm asking that this be tabled for further discussion because there are too many people here now and those who couldn't make it today that are very confused about what was discussed being the entire city, this affecting the entire city. So my point would be to table this discussion so we can have further communication with planning and zoning. The information can get out. I know Karen has a new website for single-member District 5. We can get it out in our area. Those of us who have businesses downtown can get it out in that area. I think I'm probably speaking for a lot of people that would like to see this tabled rather than this conversation continue going nowhere.
And we can do that, but there are a lot of people in the audience, and I want to give them an opportunity to come forward and speak. It can be denied, it can be delayed, it can be all those things. But for people who showed up today and want to add commentary to this conversation, I want them to have that opportunity.
Agreed.
Jamal Shumpert, single member District 2. When I was researching it, the GIS map wasn't working, so I couldn't see how big of an impact this legislation would have. So I think we should table it just so we can actually see where the zoning impacts will be. Because the GIS map did not work.
Anyone else who would like to add comment today? Seeing no one else coming forward, then we will put it in the hands of the Planning Commission to deny, to do whatever you choose to make the motion on. Harry, yes.
If they've already approved this once on the June 16th meeting, shouldn't it come before the council now and let us go ahead and vote on it?
I think generally the answer would be no, but since we've noticed it as a public hearing of both bodies to hear this item, I think it's a do-over on hearing it. So I think that them taking action on it, or if council would prefer, I mean, it's kind of up to you. But based on the amount of concerns we've heard about notice, I think the prudent thing to do is to allow them to take action and see if they want to change their vote from last time or do something different from last time. But from what I'm understanding, both from Brandon and from John, is this is exactly the same item that they did approve at a prior meeting.
Travis, do you want to take a different action on it? Because it's in your hands first if you do.
What was the vote?
Actually, I would have to, we normally include that in our presentation to the city council on this item. We did not, probably because you were revoting, so we didn't include the prior.
Can't we go back to the June 16th meeting, Planning Commission, and pull up the notes from that meeting? It's online, right? So we could do that. We'll give you time.
I'm still confused why we're revoting.
We've never voted.
Right, but
but
we have apparently.
The
and-
question is you have the opportunity to change your vote if you choose to before it comes this way, from what I understand. If you don't have an opportunity to change your vote, then it would just come to us for voting. So
It
that's
really-
what's on the table.
It really is because of that notice issue and an abundance of caution to make sure that we're complying with that new case law and all the notices that are required, or the kind of notice that's required under it.
Those minutes had not been completed, and so we can call staff to ask, they can look up what that vote was, but those minutes have not been approved yet, and so are not on the website as of
Wait a minute,
yet.
this is June, July, whatever today is, the 25th, 26th, and the minutes from June 16th haven't been completed? That doesn't sound right.
That's correct.
I know if I take notes from a month and a half ago, by the time I get ready to rewrite whatever I'm going to write, I forget half the stuff that was said. Do we go back and listen to the video? How do we ensure that minutes from a
Yes.
month and a half ago are what are
They
put
do-
into those minutes?
They do take notes during the meeting, but then they go back and listen to the meeting again as they're typing up the actual minutes from the meeting.
All right, so do you want to wait till staff comes up with what that vote is, or?
I'm sorry. Yeah, it was not in our staff report. Julia just pointed out, I did include it on the PowerPoint, which is right in front of us. So it was a 6-0 vote on May 16th.
There you go.
There you go, everyone wanted to do this.
Okay.
So with that, then it comes to city council because, right? Because it was a 6-0 vote, or?
Unless someone wants to make a motion to either adopt what we've already voted on or change it.
Seeing no one do either, what do we do? There's no one on the planning commission who has said that they're willing to ask for a revote on that issue, so then I'm assuming that means the planning commission says 6-0, they approve.
I would still recommend that you do what you did on the last item, have John go back to them, represent it, and come back with the different notification requirements, since there's such a notice problem on this issue. Whether it's perceived or accurate, there's an issue with notice, and I think that that is the most prudent course of action.
It's Travis representing the planning commission. Would that work?
Yeah, so do we need to make a motion to table it?
No, I think that council can just direct it to go back to you.
Okay,
Do
perfect.
we need to make a motion as council?
Yes.
Do I have a motion to ask that this item be brought back to the planning commission for reconsideration? And is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there public comment on the motion to send it back to the planning commission for consideration? Seeing none, we will take a vote. All of those in favor of doing so, say aye.
Aye.
It's back in your hands. With that, the last item on this agenda is follow-up and administrative issues, announcements, and consideration of future agenda items. Obviously, this will come back at some point. Both items will come back at some point for consideration and further discussion.
Yeah, I do want to add one thing. We had a woman come up and talk about short-term rentals. So there is an approval process with the Planning Commission for allowing short-term rentals anywhere within our community. And as was noted, it appears that we have a number of people that are operating short-term rentals that have not applied and that are not paying the hotel occupancy tax. I know that there are resources available online, Airbnb being one of them, VRBO, these websites that people are using to advertise these short-term rentals. Why can't our code compliance folks come in and ask those people to go through the formal process, make sure that they're documented and paying the taxes that they should be paying for the use of those facilities?
Tina, you want to come forward again and explain what we are doing?
And while she's coming up, I'll note that we have done that some in the past. One of the problems is those websites don't typically give addresses. They give a general location. Until you make a reservation, that's when they give you the actual address. So that makes the enforcement a little more difficult.
John, to get.
Just a minute. I've asked Tina to come forward and speak. When she's finished speaking, then we
Yes,
can ask questions.
Yes, ma'am. Tina Diersky, Director of Finance again. We are currently undergoing a hotel tax audit where we have selected a sample of hotels and STRs that we are reviewing to make sure that they're in compliance and also to educate them on what the rules are and where they should be remitting hotel tax. In addition, we are bringing back a contract to council specifically related to STRs so that we can review a broader sample.
Right. Go ahead.
And just to clarify, it's not a sample. It's let's find all the short-term rentals that are out there and bring them into compliance. We don't need a test or a little bit. We need all of it.
Right.
Don't-
And I've got 2 points on that. So
When we bring that contract back for city council approval, you can discuss that and give us some direction on how many you'd like to approve. Of course, the cost goes up per unit that they look at. And so what we've typically done in the past is there's a 4-year statute of limitations on that hotel tax remittance. So every 4 years, we try to select a good, maybe 50% of those that are in existence and review those and keep that rotation cycle going.
As the question as it relates to code compliance, I don't know who's here to talk about code compliance, but I'm assuming that if I lived next to someone who was conducting a short-term rental, I would be pretty sure I knew that was a short-term rental or an Airbnb property. So those next-door neighbors can also report that to code compliance. Is that happening?
Mayor,
Yes, Tommy.
I can assure you that is happening. I had one situation that Daniel and I had to work on quite extensively for quite a long period of time, but the neighbors will let you know.
And that goes back to generally code enforcement is complaint-based, and so we do follow up, as Tommy mentioned, on those that are complained about. At least from our department, we don't currently go out looking for those, as Travis is suggesting. I know there are firms that do that. I get an email once a week from a firm that says they will do that for you, that enforcement, and they just take a part of the hotel tax that you end up collecting. But it's probably something like Tina's talking about. But right now, it's largely complaint-based, and neighbors do complain, and we have a number of those cases.
So part of the approval process,
Can you-
John.
yeah,
and,
thank you.
Is it not that when they come back for their renewal and we make sure they're in good standing, that there aren't any violations from the police department or anything like that? Is the hotel tax not part of that?
Well, it is, but I think Travis's concern is the ones that are coming forward and getting approval through our process, they're doing everything right. They're paying their taxes, they're getting the conditional use approval. It's the ones that don't even come to us that are the ones that are the problem.
But then maybe I misunderstood that. The lady that came up and spoke about it, she said there were 6 Airbnbs on the website. Is that on the chamber website? Okay.
That is correct. And we pay for research through AirDNA that gives us all the addresses and all of the information on every one of those who are charging to have people stay.
Would you be willing to share that with the city?
Absolutely.
Oh,
But you don't have those that are not on your list.
The AirDNA research comes from VRBO and Airbnb. So that does include anybody who's on those advertising lists.
Well, Tina and code enforcement, you just got your
Yeah, please send that.
information.
I have shared that list with Tina.
Okay.
Okay, so Tina has
Thank
it.
you.
So it's not just a sampling, it's everybody at this point who is listed on Airbnb that we know of, but not everybody's on
Well,
Airbnb.
and just to clarify, it's not just paying the hotel occupancy tax, which obviously is income that the city deserves for the use that they have. It's also documenting where these are within our community. We have a 500-foot requirement that you can't have another one within 500 feet. So there may be violations of that requirement within our code that we're not aware of because they haven't gone through the process.
Well, the other question mark, just one second, Diane. The other question mark is if I have a rental and I am renting it out for 30 days at a time, and next month I lease to somebody else, what does that qualify as?
If it's a long-term rental, if it's over 30 days, they would not have to pay that tax according to the state law. But I would.
Includes hotels.
Yes.
But I would, yes, it includes hotels. And I would also want to express that just like hotels, the dollars that are paid through the hot tax to the city are paid by visitors and not, it's a designated tax.
Yes.
So it's not their money, it's a pass-through, much like a sales tax.
It's added to the cost of that rental, just like the cleaning fee that most people charge.
Yeah, and, all right. What else?
Just adjournment, the planning commission would adjourn first and then city council for this particular meeting.
Okay, take a motion.
To adjourn. Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0.
With that, may I have a motion to adjourn the city council meeting on this joint agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Tommy, seconded by Lucy. Any public comment concerning this item? Seeing none, we will adjourn, and we will take a 10-minute break.